The period of the Taifa kingdoms, during which the Zirids ruled, came to an end with the conquest of al-Andalus by the Almoravids from North Africa during the late 11th century. In the mid-12th century they were followed by the Almohads. After 1228 Almohad rule collapsed and local rulers and factions emerged again across the territory of Al-Andalus, with the Reconquista in full swing. The Christian kingdoms of Castile and Aragon, under Kings Ferdinand III and James I, respectively, made major conquests across Al-Andalus. Castile captured Córdoba in 1236 and Seville in 1248. Meanwhile, Ibn al-Ahmar, Muhammad I, established what became the last and longest reigning Muslim dynasty in the Iberian Peninsula, the Nasrids, who ruled the Emirate of Granada. Ibn al-Ahmar was a relatively new political player in the region and likely came from a modest background. But he was able to win the support and consent of multiple Muslim settlements under threat from the Castilian advance. Upon settling in Granada in 1238, Ibn al-Ahmar initially resided in the old citadel of the Zirids on the Albaysan hill. But that same year he began construction of the Alhambra as a new residence and citadel. According to an Arabic manuscript since published as the Anonimo de Madrid y Copenhague. This year, 1238, Abdullah ibn al-Ahmar climbed to the place called the Alhambra. He examined it, marked the foundations of a castle and left someone in charge of directing the work. And before that year had passed, the construction of the ramparts was completed. Water was brought in from the river and a channel carrying the water was built. During the reign of the Nasrid dynasty, the Alhambra was transformed into a Palatine city, complete with an irrigation system composed of aqueducts and water channels that provided water for the complex and for other nearby countryside palaces such as the Generalife. Previously, the old fortresses on the hill had been dependent on rainwater collected from the cistern near the Alcazaba and on what could be brought up from the Darro River below. The creation of the Sultan's Canal, Arabic, romanized, Sakiyat al-Sultan, which brought water from the mountains to the east, solidified the identity of the Alhambra as a palace city rather than a defensive and ascetic structure. This first hydraulic system was expanded afterwards and included 2 long water channels and several sophisticated elevation devices to bring water onto the plateau. Later Nasrid rulers after Ibn al-Ahmar continuously modified the site, along with the fragile materials themselves, which needed regular repairs. This makes the exact chronology of its development difficult to determine. The only elements preserved from the time of Ibn al-Ahmar are some of the fortification walls, particularly the Alcazaba at the western end of the complex. Ibn al-Ahmar did not have time to complete any major new palaces and he may have initially lived in one of the towers of the Alcazaba, before later moving to a modest house on the site of the current palace of Charles V. The oldest major palace for which some remains have been preserved is the structure known as the Palacio del Partal Alto, in an elevated location near the center of the complex, which probably dates from the reign of Ibn al-Ahmar's son, Muhammad II, r. 1273–1302. To the south was the palace of the Abencerrages, and to the east was another private palace, known as the Palace of the Convent of San Francisco, both of which were probably also originally constructed during the time of Muhammad II. Muhammad III, r. 1302–1309, erected the Partal Palace, parts of which are still standing today, as well as the Alhambra's main congregational mosque. on the site of the current church of Santa Maria de la Alhambra. The Partal Palace is the earliest known palace to be built along the northern walls of the complex, with views onto the city below. It is also the oldest Nasrid palace still standing today. Isma, Eli, R. 1314–1325, undertook a significant remodeling of the Alhambra. His reign marked the beginning of the classical period of Nasrid architecture, during which many major monuments in the Alhambra were begun and decorative styles were consolidated. Isma Il decided to build a new palace complex just east of the Alcazaba to serve as the official palace of the Sultan and the state, known as the Qasr al-Sultan or Dar al-Mulk. The core of this complex was the Comares Palace, while another wing of the palace, the Meksha, extended to the west. The Comares baths are the best preserved element from this initial construction, as the rest of the palace was further modified by his successors. Near the main mosque Isma Eli also created the Rauda, the dynastic mausoleum of the Nasrids, of which only partial remains are preserved. Yusuf I. R. 1333–1354 carried out further work on the Comares Palace, including the construction of the Hall of Ambassadors and other works around the current Meksha. He also built the Alhambra's main gate, the Puerta de la Justicia, and the Torre de la Cortiva, one of several small towers with richly decorated rooms along the northern walls. Muhammad V's reign, 1354–1391, with interruptions, marked the political and cultural apogee of the Nasrid Emirate as well as the apogee of Nasrid architecture, particularly during his second reign. After 1362, there was a stylistic shift towards more innovative architectural layouts and an extensive use of complex mechanas vaulting. His most significant contribution to the Alhambra was the construction of the Palace of the Lions, to the east of the Comares Palace in an area previously occupied by gardens. He also remodeled the Meksha, created the highly decorated Comares facade in the Patio del Cuarto Dorado, and redecorated the Court of the Myrtles, giving these areas much of their final appearance. After Muhammad V, relatively little major construction work occurred in the Alhambra. One exception is the Torre de las Infantas, which dates from the time of Muhammad VII, 1392–1408. The 15th century saw the Nasrid dynasty in decline and in turmoil, with few significant construction projects and a more repetitive, less innovative style of architecture.